Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: skepticism grows over Israel's ability to dismantle Hamas. Fears are rising of a widened Middle East war and U.S. troops are in the firing line. Why China is unlikely to join U.S.-led force against Houthi attacks in Red Sea. Houthi attacks and U.S. strikes heighten risk of wider Middle East war. Israel launches heavy strikes across central and southern Gaza after widening its offensive. Skepticism grows over Israel's ability to dismantle Hamas. New York Times. Hamas is proving to be a formidable opponent for the Israeli military, despite its best efforts to destroy the group. Hamas has been able to replace commanders who have been killed with others who are equally capable and equally devoted, according to Gior Eiland, a retired major general and former head of the Israeli National Security Council. The group's top echelon is believed to be sheltering, along with most of its fighters, in deep tunnels, which the Israeli army has said that it destroyed at least 1,500 of, but experts consider the underground infrastructure to be largely intact. Although the Israeli military has killed about 8,000 Hamas fighters out of an estimated force of 25,000 to 40,000, the group is still showing that it has an offensive military capability, according to Tariq Bakoni, an author who wrote a book about the group. The aim for Israel is to first dismantle the government and then to disperse the fighters and eliminate the commanders and their primary subordinates, according to an Israeli military official. Even if Israel succeeded in dismantling Hamas in Gaza, there are still branches in the West Bank and abroad that could revive it. Fears are rising of a widened Middle East war and U.S. troops are in the firing line. CNN. There are growing concerns that the Gaza conflict could escalate into a wider regional conflict with severe consequences for the U.S. The U.S. military is increasingly under attack from Iran and its proxies, with incidents occurring throughout the region from the Indian Ocean to the Red Sea. However, the situation is particularly dangerous for U.S. personnel based in Iraq and Syria, who are within easy reach of Iran-affiliated militant groups. If the situation worsens and U.S. soldiers are killed or naval assets are seriously damaged, there will be pressure on the U.S. to become more involved in the region, something that the last 3 presidents have tried to avoid. The potential for disruption in the Red Sea, an important route for global energy and goods, is also causing concern. The threat to shipping has prompted some freight lines to reroute their journeys around Africa, rather than through the Suez Canal, which would be more expensive and time-consuming. The economic and military consequences of a broadened conflict would be significant, and the geopolitical trend of testing America's will and credibility is worrying for the U.S. as it heads into an election year. Why China is unlikely to join U.S.-led force against Houthi attacks in Red Sea. South China Morning Post. China is unlikely to send naval forces to the Red Sea to combat Houthi militants, despite being invited by the U.S. Analysts suggest that China will not join the anti-piracy drive until its own vessels face security threats. Houthi militants, who are backed by Iran, have been attacking commercial vessels linked to Israel in the lower Red Sea since November. The Houthis' assaults have led to shipping companies suspending transits through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The U.S. has established a coalition of over 20 countries to protect commercial traffic in the Red Sea from Houthi attacks. China has been invited to join the coalition but has not responded directly. Analysts suggest that China is concerned that opposing the Houthis could be seen as a capitulation to U.S. interests and a humiliation of China. Beijing has consistently condemned Israel's actions in Gaza and the West Bank. The Red Sea route has seen a sharp jump in booking prices as a result of the Houthi attacks. Song Zhongping, a military commentator, suggests that China will only join the U.S.-led coalition if its interests are threatened. Houthi attacks and U.S. strikes heighten risk of wider Middle East war. South China Morning Post. U.S. airstrikes on targets in Iraq and attacks by Houthi militants on shipping in the Red Sea are warning signs that the war in Gaza could escalate into a wider conflict destabilizing the Middle East. The Pentagon launched strikes on 3 installations in Iraq linked to Kataib Hezbollah after the group injured 3 U.S. personnel in an attack backed by Iran. Houthi rebels, also backed by Iran, attacked a container ship in the Red Sea. The U.S. and other nations have formed a maritime task force to respond to the attacks. Oil prices rose as tensions remained high over the shipping disruptions. Israel launches heavy strikes across central and southern Gaza after widening its offensive. Associated Press. Israel has expanded its offensive against Hamas in Gaza, launching heavy strikes across central and southern areas. The strikes targeted areas where Palestinians had sought shelter, causing widespread destruction. The military has ordered the evacuation of an area in central Gaza that is currently home to 61,000 displaced people. The offensive has already resulted in the deaths of over 20,900 Palestinians, with 2/3 of them being women and children. The UN has warned that a quarter of Gaza's population is starving due to Israel's siege, which has severely restricted the flow of essential supplies. The unwelcome resurgence of war. Financial Times. The number of armed conflicts around the world has reached its highest level in over 3 decades, with 183 ongoing conflicts recorded, according to the International Institute for Strategic Studies. The conflicts range from the well-known, such as the war between Russia and Ukraine and the conflict between Israel and Gaza, to lesser-known conflicts in Sudan, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Myanmar. The reasons for the resurgence of war are complex, but factors such as the relative decline of Western power, intelligence failures, the breakdown of central authority in Africa, and climate change all play a role. Containing and suppressing these conflicts will require a combination of diplomacy, deterrence, and preventive action. Morning Report. Johnson's tricky 2024. The Hill opinion. Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican Louisiana, is heading into the new year facing a daunting legislative to-do list, a tiny window to get it passed, and a warring GOP conference that will complicate his strategy at every turn. The new speaker is being squeezed between competing GOP interests as he approaches a pair of urgent government funding deadlines, and faces the same predicaments that felled his predecessor, former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican California. Some of the restive conservatives who toppled McCarthy have given Johnson wiggle room on some divisive issues, particularly on passing a clean funding stopgap. But 2 months into Johnson's tenure, The Hill's Emily Brooks and Mike Lillis report, they are getting more restless and openly frustrated with some of his tactics, a sign of potential trouble when Congress returns to address hot-button issues such as government spending and aid for Ukraine. Representative Tim Burchett, Republican Tennessee, one of the 8 Republicans who voted to oust McCarthy, signaled that patience with Johnson is running short. "I realize it's a game of numbers," Burchett said. "But I'm ready to start taking some stand." Israeli raid on West Bank refugee camp kills 6, Palestinians say. New York Times. Israeli forces conducted a raid on a refugee camp in the occupied West Bank, resulting in the deaths of 6 Palestinians. The Israeli military claims that they were carrying out counter-terrorism activity and targeted terrorists who hurled explosive devices at the forces. However, it is not possible to independently verify this. Since the war in Gaza began on October 7, there has been a surge of violence in the West Bank. Israeli forces have been conducting near-daily raids in response to terrorist attacks from Gaza. As a result, movement within the West Bank has been severely restricted and work permits for Palestinians have been revoked. Israel has described these raids as an extension of the war against Hamas in Gaza. There has also been a surge in arrests, with many detainees being held without charge or trial. Since October 7, over 280 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank, mostly by Israeli forces. Shipping giant says Red Sea route too dangerous. BBC. German shipping firm Hapag-Lloyd has announced that it will not resume its use of the Suez Canal despite an international military operation to ensure safety in the area. The company is considering the route too dangerous and will continue to reroute its ships via the Cape of Good Hope. This comes after other companies have also chosen to avoid the canal following attacks by Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Suez Canal is a key route for trade between Europe and Africa, and disruptions to the canal will significantly impact Egypt's foreign currency earnings. Israel begins ground combat operations in central Gaza Strip. Financial Times. Israel has launched ground combat operations in the central area of the Gaza Strip, targeting refugee camps that have suffered intense shelling. The offensive comes after hundreds of Palestinians were killed in the bombardment of the Burej and Maghazi camps. Israel's land offensive has so far focused on Gaza City and Khan Yunis, and civilians trapped in the enclave have been forced to flee to small safe zones. The death toll in Gaza has risen to over 20,900 since the start of the war on October 7, triggered by a Hamas attack on communities in southern Israel. Well, my astute and perceptive viewers, it seems that skepticism is growing over Israel's ability to dismantle Hamas. Despite their best efforts, Hamas is proving to be a formidable opponent for the Israeli military. They've been able to replace commanders who have been killed, and their top echelon is believed to be sheltering in deep tunnels, which the Israeli army has struggled to destroy. The aim for Israel is to first dismantle the government and then to disperse the fighters and eliminate the commanders, but even if they succeed in Gaza, there are still branches of Hamas in the West Bank and abroad that could revive it. It looks like Hamas is playing a game of whack-a-mole with Israel. But wait, there's more. Fears are rising of a widened Middle East war, and U.S. troops are in the firing line. The Gaza conflict could escalate into a wider regional conflict with severe consequences for the U.S. The U.S. military is increasingly under attack from Iran and its proxies, and if US soldiers are killed or naval assets are seriously damaged, there will be pressure on the US to become more involved in the region. The potential for disruption in the Red Sea, an important route for global energy and goods, is also causing concern. Some freight lines are rerouting their journeys around Africa, rather than through the Suez Canal, due to the threat to shipping. Oh, the joys of geopolitics and international tensions. And speaking of tensions, China is unlikely to join the US-led force against Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. China has been invited to join the coalition to protect commercial traffic, but analysts suggest that China is concerned about opposing the Houthis, as it could be seen as a capitulation to US interests and a humiliation of China. Ah, the delicate dance of international relations. But wait, there's more. US airstrikes on targets in Iraq and attacks by Houthi militants on shipping in the Red Sea are warning signs that the war in Gaza could escalate into a wider conflict, destabilizing the Middle East. The US launched strikes on installations in Iraq linked to Iran-backed groups, and Houthi rebels attacked a container ship in the Red Sea. Tensions remain high and oil prices have risen as a result of the shipping disruptions. Oh, the joys of the Middle East, a never-ending source of drama. And let's not forget about the ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza. Israel has expanded its offensive, launching heavy strikes across central and southern areas. Unfortunately, the strikes have also targeted areas where Palestinians had sought shelter, causing widespread destruction. The offensive has already resulted in the deaths of over 20,900 Palestinians, with two-thirds of them being women and children. The UN has warned that a quarter of Gaza's population is starving due to Israel's siege, which has severely restricted the flow of essential supplies. Oh, the horrors of war and its devastating impact on innocent lives. But wait, there's more. The number of armed conflicts around the world has reached its highest level in over 3 decades. There are currently 183 ongoing conflicts, ranging from well-known conflicts like the war between Russia and Ukraine to lesser-known conflicts in Sudan, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Myanmar. The reasons for this resurgence of war are complex, but factors such as the relative decline of Western power, intelligence failures, the breakdown of central authority in Africa, and climate change all play a role. The world is a chaotic place, my friends. And finally, in the world of US politics, Speaker Mike Johnson is facing a daunting legislative to-do list and a warring GOP conference. He's being squeezed between competing GOP interests and is struggling to pass urgent government funding and address hot-button issues such as government spending and aid for Ukraine. Oh, the joys of politics and the never-ending battles for power and influence. So, my dear viewers, what do you make of all this chaos and conflict? Are you as perplexed as I am? Do you have any thoughts or questions about these news stories? Share your insights and let's navigate these tumultuous times together. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.